Welcome to How You Livin', a transformative podcast featuring best-selling author, inspirational speaker, and minister, Dr. Rick Rigsby. And now, Dr. Rick.
Hello, friends. Thanks so much for listening. This episode is the final installment of a series of discussions on the most profound lesson ever taught to me by my father. My dad was the wisest man I've ever met in my life, yet he was just a third-grade dropout. He had so much wisdom. Here's an example. 3 decades ago, as I stood in front of the casket of my first wife with my 2 young sons, I felt hopeless. I was just 40 years of age, and after bravely battling breast cancer for nearly 6 years, Trina's heart finally gave out. She was only 41 years old. Our boys were devastated over the loss of their mommy, and I was lost. Trina was my college sweetheart. She was the love of my youth. Yes, I was a Christian. Yes, I believed in God. Yes, I was a pastor. Yes, I could rehearse all the appropriate scriptures that I had memorized to help others in such a time. Scriptures like Romans 8:28, which states, "And we know that all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord, who are called according to his purpose." Yes, I knew every scripture, but at this point, at this time, at this hour, it didn't matter to me. Yes, I believed in God. I loved God. I believed in his word. I trusted him, but I was human. I was a husband, a grieving husband. I was a father, a heartbroken father, and a man who suddenly found himself labeled widower. Trina was pronounced dead midnight, September the 8th, 1996. It was a Sunday. I remember very vividly sitting in my friend Dwight's car in the parking lot, not wanting to leave the hospital, for what good husband would leave the side of his wife? Even though I knew she was gone, I still couldn't bring myself to leave for hours. Finally, Dwight looked at me and he said, "Rick, I don't know why Trina died, but I do know this: God is sovereign." You know, I held on to those words for days, for weeks, for months, for years. I still hold on to those words 28 years later. Well, we did finally leave the hospital, despite my hesitation. We got home around 2:30 in the morning, and despite the early hour, my home was buzzing with people. Word had spread, and people were there. I'll always be grateful for that. My boys will always be grateful for that. Friends, allow me just a moment to walk you through the next few days. I want to establish the context for the greatest lesson I ever learned in my life. So Trina died midnight Sunday. Monday, the business of death occurred. I was not ready. It meant I went to the benefits office, the systems office at Texas A&M University, my employer at the time. And I can remember filling out all of the appropriate forms for benefits for Trina. And I got to a point in one form where it simply stated marital status: single, married, divorced, widowed. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. I think I cried for about a half hour, just had a meltdown right there in the middle of the building. Tuesday, it got even worse. Tuesday was the day that you meet with the funeral directors. Now, I had done this many times, but not as a participant, but as clergy. This was the day, though, that I would discuss the details of the funeral. Details to this day I cannot even remember. The only thing I do remember was this: handing Trina's clothes to the funeral directors for burial. That's all I remember. Thursday, it got worse. Thursday was the funeral. It was the worst day of my life. Friends, I don't remember much about the funeral. I remember that my sons, Jeremiah and Andrew, cried softly on each shoulder. I actually felt like I was living in somebody else's nightmare. Until being diagnosed with advanced breast cancer, we'd lived a fairy tale life. It began back in 1974 when I asked this young lady to dance. We became college sweethearts. We married in 1978. Trina was a labor and delivery nurse at a nearby hospital. I was beginning my career as a television reporter for a CBS affiliate in Northern California. Eventually, we'd have 2 sons. Trina would choose to retire from nursing and homeschool. I would eventually retire from television, and I would pursue graduate studies, 6 years of graduate school. Fast forward, it's now 1990. Graduate school is in the rearview mirror. No more school, no more late hours, no more staying up all hours of the night, no more pinching every single penny, no more collecting cash from turning in bottles and cans. In fact, I humorously remember my first check as an assistant professor at California State University, Fresno. My first check, my take-home pay, $2,200. I looked at Trina and I said, "We're rich! We're rich!" No more Top Ramen. No more turkey dogs. I thought we had struck gold. That was September 1990. 6 months later, during a self-breast examination at home, Trina discovered a lump that would eventually cause the 3 of us to stand in front of Mommy's casket. Standing in front of that casket, holding the hands of my 2 sons, overwhelmed with profound sadness and feeling completely lost, I said to my father, "Dad, I've lost hope." My dad said, "Son, you can't lose something God gave you. You haven't lost hope. You've lost perspective. Now, son, just stand." Simple, profound, life-changing. It was the most important lesson that my dad had learned from his parents, my grandparents. I think about how many times my father must have had to stand in his life. He was born in 1920 as America breathed the last gasp of the Civil War. He would tell us stories where he decided to stand, not as a white man, not as a brown man, not as a black man, but as a man. I can only imagine him standing in the theater of war. My father was in the United States Army during World War II. He had to stand along with countless other young men. He had to stand overseas, away from a mother, away from a father, in the midst of uncertainty, not knowing if he would come home. As a young soldier fighting overseas, he had to stand. My dad faced every kind of racial prejudice and discrimination. He had to stand. And you know what's amazing to me, friends? I never heard my dad whimper. Never heard my dad complain. Never heard a judgmental tone from my dad. And I never saw my dad give in or give up. He simply and unwittingly stood. Let me pause and identify what I've discovered that causes a person to stand, regardless of the situation, regardless of the exigence, regardless of the odds. I have discovered that one thing causes a person to keep standing: influence. It was John Maxwell who said on one occasion, "Influence is leadership." He actually said it this way: leadership is influence. Your ability to influence others within the sphere of your periphery will really determine your impact. Standing requires great influence. My dad grew his influence every single day. That's what great people do. Great people do things that other people don't. My dad grew his influence every day. He allowed circumstances and issues and situations and problems and setbacks to grow his resilience. He developed, as a result, a never give up mindset. One of my heroes is Winston Churchill. Gave a speech at his alma mater in 1941 at the height of World War II. This was a time when the United Kingdom was struggling against Nazi Germany. Churchill's speech was given to students at Harrow School in London, a private boarding school for boys. Churchill once attended this school. Now, there are varying renditions of this story. Here's my favorite. At the time appointed for Churchill to speak, he rose to his feet. He handed off his cane, took off his felt Homburg hat, removed his overcoat, set aside his cigar, and said, "Never, never, never give up." put back on his top coat, placed his hat back on his head, relit his cigar, and sat down. I heard a version of that very same speech on September 12th, 1996. You see, in my mind, my Winston Churchill, my father, was saying this to me. His words were, "Son, just stand," but this is what I heard. "Don't quit, son. Don't give up. Those are my grandchildren. You're my son. And I need to know that you're not going to quit, that you're not going to give up. I need to know, son, that you're going to keep standing." My father on that day, at that hour, demanded that I stand, even when I didn't think I could stand, even when I didn't think I could keep going. So I think, friends, that, in fact, I know that to just stand is the greatest lesson I can share with you. Why? Because some listening this very minute, you're in the middle of a storm. It might be a physical storm, a financial storm, a relational storm, a career-oriented storm, the worst kind, those unexpected storms. Here's my hope. These words from a third grade dropout, that these words echoed by great people all throughout history will encourage you to stand regardless of what you're facing. Make standing a hallmark of your life. Make standing a habit. Oh, I've got some bad habits. You do as well. But I prefer to develop the good habits. It was English writer and poet Samuel Johnson who said on one occasion, "The chains of habit are too light to be felt until too heavy to be broken." Make standing so natural that it becomes a joy rather than a burden, second nature rather than occasional. A formidable resilience will grow inside of you. Others will be greatly influenced around you. Friends, I'll tell you as I close, every great leader I know, they share similar characteristics. They're not afraid to fail. They're passionate about what they do. They lead with relentless and just robust humility. They surround themselves with exceptional people. They've learned the value of disruptive thinking. They tend to ignore the status quo and popular opinion, and most of all, they never, ever, ever, ever give up. They never quit. One of my favorite quotes is by Henry Ford. This quote just really establishes in my mind why he refused to listen to others, and he refused to give up on his dream of creating an automobile. He said on one occasion, "Had I listened to people, I would have made faster horses." Friends, when we stand, we place a demand upon our spirit to not quit. When we stand, we impact those around us. When we stand, our convictions are strengthened. We speak and act based on values and beliefs. When we stand, our resilience grows. Our influence is fortified. Remember the words of John Maxwell, leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. When we stand, we are communicating a powerful message to our brain that we're not quitting. We're not giving up. We're digging in with a resolve that may have been not present in the past, but today is a new day, a day that we stand, a day that we become relentless, resilient, and influential. When we stand, friends, others are affected and influenced to do the very same. They see in our lives the possibility that maybe, just maybe, they can keep on going. So I ask you this question, friends. What drives your actions? People behave in ways that align their incentives. People behave in ways that align with their incentives. It was former Berkshire Hathaway executive and Warren Buffett, a Charlie Munger, who said on one occasion, "Show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome." People behave in ways that align with their incentives. My incentive for standing is this: to be the best version of me I can be in a way that helps and encourages and inspires and uplifts everyone I encounter. So I ask this: what lesson could possibly be more profitable? What decision could possibly be more meaningful? What choice can be more life-changing than simply making the determination this hour to stand? Well, that's going to do it for this episode. Until we meet again, this is Dr. Rick asking the most important question I can ask: how you living?
Are you ready to make an impact in your world right now? Do you want to stop existing and start living your best life right now? Dr. Rick wants to give you the first chapter of his best-selling book, Lessons from a Third Grade Dropout, absolutely free. Just go to www.rickrigsby.com/free gift to get the print or audiobook right now.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.